Hi, Caleb.
Hey, man.
So you want to tell me your story about how you came to Christ?
Sure. Well, it was, for me, it was, there was like an initial event and then a process before I actually made the decision, you know. So the event was hearing God's voice speak to me in a hotel room when I was on tour back in, 1978. It was on my 30th birthday in 1978. And I was playing with a band called Hall Oates, and I was a very successful musician. And on my birthday, we did this gig in Atlanta, Georgia, and at the Omni Theater, and we were staying in the adjacent hotel, the Omni Hotel. So after we finished the concert, we went back to our rooms, and then the band and the crew barged into my room for a surprise birthday party, you know. And so it was a very illegal birthday party. This cake was just covered with drugs and everything. And we partied on through, and it was about, 4 o'clock in the morning. They crawled out of my room, and I was sat in this chair, kind of just like this, on the 9th floor at this hotel, and just chilling out. And all of a sudden, this voice speaks to me. I mean, like I'm speaking to you. Loud, clear. It was inside of me, and it was all in the room as well. It was so loud, I actually thought that somebody had crept into my room. And I turned around to look around, see, and there was nobody there, you know. And this voice said these words to me. It said, called me by my name. It said, Caleb, from this point on, your life is going to be completely different. Nothing's going to be the same for you ever again. And in that instant, I was no longer high on the drugs and everything else. You know, we'd been on the road for 6 months, you know, it was a crazy time. Wow. And we used to do these long tours. And I just sat there in the midst of what I can only describe as an electric silence. I was no longer high, I'm stone cold sober. And all I knew was, in my limited understanding, all I knew was that I had been spoken to. I just didn't know by whom. So I sat there and I made a promise to myself. I said, one day, I'm going to find out who that voice belonged to. Now, in rock and roll, there's this whole thing that you're supposed to die by the time you get to 30, you know. So word had gone out in the industry, Caleb had just turned 30. So I'd bump into a bunch of musician friends, you know, on tour and everything, you know. And they would say to me, hey, man, we just heard you just turned 30. What happened? Like as if I'm supposed to, like, die right now, you know, keel over, you know. So I would tell them the same story I just told you. And the response I got was pretty interesting. It was like, wow, man, that's far out. You know, back in those days, everything was far out. Wow, man, that's far out. You know, what were you smoking? Where can we get some? You know, it sounds great. You know, who's the dealer? Can you hook a brother up? You know, and I would say, no, this was a real voice. This was something real. You know, and it's interesting. You know, it's like when you hear God's voice, you cannot shake it. You know, I could not get rid of this. You know, it stayed with me. So that was 1978. That was the initial event, you know. And a few years later, we rolled the clock on to 1980. I became friends with a guy who was a very well-known drummer, Chester Thompson, who used to play for Genesis and Phil Collins. And he invited me to join his jazz group that he'd put together. So I thought, great, yeah, I really want to work with this guy, you know. And turns out him and his wife were Christians, you know. And he would let me know that, you know, they were Christians, you know. And I was going, yeah, great, that's good for you, you know, yeah, just, I've got my joints, I've got my stuff, you got it, great, you know. I'm not interested in church, you know. But they were very kind, very gracious people. They didn't preach to me or anything like that. But I knew that there was something about this guy that was different. We were the same age, we were in the same line of work, you know. Same, we were both professional musicians, you know. But he wasn't messed up like everybody else was, you know. And I didn't tell him, but I used to think to myself, this guy has got hold of something. And whatever it is, I want it.
Like an aura?
It wasn't even that. I would describe it as peace and solidity.
Huh.
He weren't bouncing off the wall. He was peace. It was peace and solid, you know. And I thought, he's got something, and whatever it is, I want it, you know. So that was 1980. We get to 1982, and by this time, I'm a real mess. I've been into drugs for like 18 years by that time, you know. And one day, he asked me if I'd like to go to church. And this happened to be Easter Day, 1982. And he said, why don't you come to church with us? You know, it's Easter. And I'd been up all night dealing and people banging on the, I mean, it was like a crazy situation. And I'm on the phone. When he asked me that question, I thought to myself, you know, I've tried everything else. Why not church? I said, okay, I'll go to church with you. He said, that's great. Me and my wife will come and pick you up. So he picks me up Sunday morning, you know, takes me to church, and it's Church on the Way in Van Nuys, California. Van Nuys, it's Pastor Jack Hayford. And so he takes me to this church. And, you know, first impressions are everything, you know. So he takes me to this brand new building, you know, and we walk in, and it's like everybody's happy. And I'm thinking, this cannot be a church because everybody's happy. Because I'd grown up in church in England as a kid, you know, and there weren't nobody happy there. It was droning organ, the Vicar's Tea Party, and it was like everybody was just pickled in religion. There was no joy or nothing, you know. So I thought, well, these people are just way too happy to be, this cannot be a church. So then we go through these two doors into the sanctuary to find our seats, you know. And the first thing I see this massive big Yamaha mixing console, you know, sound console, you know. I look at the stage, there's drums, guitars, there's all these instruments up there. I'm thinking, well, there ain't no way this is a church, you know, because I thought church was just the old pipe organ and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I thought, there's no way this is. So I thought, oh, I know what's going on here. My friend Chester, he's taken me to a surprise gig. And any minute now, the Grateful Dead are going to come out and blow everybody away. You know, that's my thinking, you know. And he can see I'm kind of like, you know, perplexed by all this, you know. So he said, don't worry, let's take a seat. We'll sit down, everything will be fine, you know. So I sit down, and then some folks came out, the worship team came out, they started singing these worship songs, you know, of which I knew none, you know. By then they're doing what we would call choruses, you know. And I grew up singing the old hymns in church, so I couldn't recognize anything they're singing. But they sang this one song, and it's a song called In My Life, Lord, Be Glorified Today. It's just a very simple chorus, it just repeats, that's it, you know. And as this is going down, and me being the musician, I'm analyzing the music, the chords, oh, that's nice, this is cool, you know. And the music started to get to my heart, you know. And as I'm listening to this, and then I could see people, and I knew nothing about Pentecostal or charismatic or anything like that. You know, people are lifting their hands, and it's all getting very expressive in there, you know. And you could feel the presence, you know, in there. And I'm starting to think, wait a minute, these people are singing to Jesus. What's going on here? This is something. And as I'm in the process of trying to figure this deal out, the same voice I'd heard in the hotel room back in 1978 speaks to me right there. This is the voice I'd promised myself one day I'm going to find out who that voice belongs to. Speaks to me right there in the middle of that song and says to me, Caleb, it's time for you to come back home to me today, because I have a brand new life for you. Then the light bulb went. I went, oh, that is Jesus. That voice. Now I know who that voice belongs to, you know. And I sat there, I just gripped the chair. There was a war going on inside of me. I'm sweating, and the pastor comes out, and he's launching into his Easter sermon. You know, it's Easter Day. I didn't understand a word the man said. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, who is this man in a brown suit that's telling my story to everybody? Because the story of Easter is for everybody, you know. And I couldn't figure it out. It's like he's telling my life story to everybody, you know. What's going on here, you know? And the only thing I know, next thing I know is that we're at the end of the service and he gives an invitation. I've stood up, my hands up in the air. I'm thinking, how did I get up here? What is going on? I ran down to the front, you know. Somebody took me into a prayer room. I don't know what kind of prayer I said. I just said yes to whatever they had, you know. And that's when I said yes to Jesus. That's when I said yes to Jesus. But for me, there's two days in the year that are very important. One is Easter Day, because that's the day when I said yes to Jesus. But when I said yes to Jesus, I was still a drug addict. You know, I went home. I'm dealing. Chester's gone back on the road. He was my only connection to the church. I'm still doing all this mess, you know. And I suddenly got very, very sick. Almost died. I just cut the long story short. I'm laying on a bed, should have been my deathbed, you know, and saw a vision of myself. Everything went black. Like 1 minute, my eyeballs are wide open, the window's open. It's a bright spring California day. I've suddenly gone blind. I can't see a thing. I see myself being dragged down this black hole. I see flames at the end. I knew it was hell down there. I didn't want to end up there, so I cried out to God, made a deal with God. Said a crazy prayer to God, and I'd forgotten what had happened on Easter Day at the church. And I just said, God, this is my prayer. I said, if you would just help me turn this page in my book and just give me Jesus, I'll give you the rest of my life. And right then, that same voice speaks to me, says, go get yourself baptized today. I thought, okay, how am I going to do that? So I called my friend Chester. It just so happened he'd just gotten back home the night before. And this is now a Sunday morning. I called him up. Hey man, how you doing? I said, well man, I'm a mess right now. All I know is I need to get baptized. I feel like God's telling me I've got to get baptized and it's got to be today. Can you help me? Well, he started to get real excited on the phone. He says, yeah man, that's great. He says, do you know what day it is today? I said, well, no, I think it's Sunday. He said, it's Pentecost. I said, what is that? You know, so he starts trying to give me a Bible study down the phone and he's talking about the birth of the church, you know, the Spirit being... I said, it sounds great. I said, all I know is I got to get my body in the water today. Can you help me? He says, yeah, you know what? He says that we're having a service today and tonight they're doing baptisms at the church tonight. We'll pick you up. Okay, great. Him and his wife picked me up. To cut a long story short, they take me to the church. I sit in this baptism class. There were 13 of us getting baptized. You know, the guys giving us some instruction. You know, and I remember at the end of it, he said, oh, by the way, and it was just like a throwaway. He said, oh, by the way, if you want to receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit, just see one of the elders and they'll take care of it. Okay, great. So now we're in line, getting ready to go into the water, and I'm at the back. I'm at the back of the line. And I'm standing there and the organ starts playing and they start worshiping. We're stood behind this curtain. And all of a sudden, Pastor Jack comes onto the platform. I didn't see him, I could hear him. And he stops the worship. And he says, church, he says, today is Pentecost. And I believe the Lord would have us all sing in the Spirit. Now, I had no idea what that was about. So the organ starts playing again. And then the church, there's about 1,500 people in the church. They start now, they're singing, they're not singing in English, they're singing in tongues. You know, I had no idea what that was about. And I started to get a little irritated. I'm thinking, what are these crazy people doing? Singing in French, Greek, and Spanish all at the same time. I just want to go home and get well. Can we just get in the water, you know? And there's this, I'm standing there, man, and it's like, all of a sudden, again, the same voice speaks to me and says, Caleb, you're a musician. I want you to come up here and hear this. And it's like an invisible trap door opened above my head and my body stayed here, but the rest of me just shot up and I'm no longer in this realm. I'm not hearing the singing in the church. I ain't hearing the organ. I'm hearing some other kind of music. I'm hearing the worship that's going on in heaven, around the throne of God in heaven. And I was out of here for like 3 days as far as I was concerned. And what I was hearing was so perfect and so all-consuming. It was like, the only thing I remember is it started to wind down. There was a guy standing next to me, and I just screamed at him. I said, somebody better get me in that water quick, because I can't stand this anymore. So I pushed myself to the front, because by this time they'd like tiptoeing in slowly to get in the water. And I'd had it. I was wrecked. I just pushed my way to the front and dived in the water. One of the pastors grabbed me by the throat and they just dunked me under. It's all right, son, held me down there till I'm bubbling. We'll get it all out, And here's the thing, I went in the water an 18-year drug addict, a mess, came up with a new mind, totally brand new. I didn't and I know it doesn't happen with everybody, but by the grace of God, I did not have to go to no rehab, no 12-step, no nothing. For me, it was one step into all that Jesus has. And that was it. I came out of the water. They gave me a towel to start drying off. I'm starting to dry off. And I'm tapping my side here. And I couldn't see anything, but I could feel my hand go through an invisible hole in my side. And I was looking back at the water, because I knew that something had been taken out of me and it was left dying in the water.
Wow.
It was a demon that drives it was a demonic thing. It was a demonic spirit. That hole stayed and shrank up a little bit every day, stayed for a week. I'd feel it in the shower every morning. It lasted for a week and died up. And Scripture says in Romans 6 talks about baptism, water baptism, being a surgery that's made with our hands. Excuse me. And that's how I got delivered from 18 years of drugs.
Wow.
And I got filled with the Spirit at the same time as well.
That's one heck of a story.
Yeah, so that's why I've never been the same since. Thank God.
Well, thank you for sharing, man. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Wow.
Why don't you tell us your story?
Well, yeah. Well, I grew up Catholic, and my family, my grandma and my great aunts in particular were very close to Christ and prayed every day. And I'd go to bed at my grandma's house, and she would just pray for hours before she went to bed. Like I was like, what is she doing? How can you just talk to yourself for that long, I couldn't understand, but she would cry sometimes and she'd just pray, but she's very close. And then later she taught us pray before bed, and during that I was able to develop a relationship with him, and but as I grew older, kind of went my own way, as we tend to do sometimes. Got angry at him, but come to realize later that he never left me as I left him. He was always there, just waiting for me. My grandfather had passed away, and I kind of was just starting to get close to him, and then I kind of shunned him. Rebelled for quite some time into my to my 30s, and I ended up working at a gentleman's club, and just at first it was cool and fun, and everything that a young guy would think they would want, and but every time I went there, longer and longer I worked there, I just felt like it was taking a piece of me every little time. Like there was something that I didn't like about myself, how I was becoming. And no matter how much positive energy, and great attitude I come into work with it, I'd leave, depressed, angry, and I just didn't know that at that time, there was a lot of spiritual warfare in those type of places. And eventually, I just would despise working there. I only stay there to make money, you know. And I would work the morning shift from noon to about 8 at one club, and then I go to the other club, a nightclub, from Torrance to L.A., and then I work 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Just, you know, on drugs and doing all kinds of things with, you know, anything you could really imagine. And, you know, no matter what I did, it just was never fulfilling. It was never enough to fill me and make me feel satisfied. And I just got into a depression, and I didn't like working there no more. I would leave for lunch. You know, we'd have a half-hour lunch. I'd drive 15 minutes away from the club and 15 minutes back to the club. And then it got to a point where I would take an hour lunch, even though I wasn't supposed to. I'd drive 30 minutes away and then 30 minutes back. And I got to a point where I was on a lunch break, and I just broke down in the car driving. And I just cried out to God. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this anymore. If I keep on going this road, I know nothing good is going to come from this. And I told him, you know, just please, I need you. I don't know what to do. Just put me where you want me. Show me what you want me to do. I'm done. Take it, you know. And that day, I just cried and bawled out in the car, and then I called my fiance and asked her, I was like, hey, you know, you think you could take the reins for a little bit? I'm not doing this no more. You know, she was pretty graceful about it. You know, she was like, yeah, go ahead, do what you have to do. She was like, I know you're not happy. And that night, I went talked to my manager. I was like, I don't, you know, 2 weeks. You know, I want you to write my paperwork right now, tonight. I'm done. I'm never going to come back here. And I was wondering, like, all right, what am I going to do for money? You know, what now? But, you know, I knew that was not the place. I had enough. So he wrote the paperwork up. He's like, are you sure? You know, we like you here. And I'm like, no, that's it. I'm done. And I'm sorry. I was like, can you finish the night? He was a good friend of mine. He was like, yeah, I'll finish the night. And that's that. You know, so I stayed. That was the last day I worked at the club. And then was a lot of being at home and, you know, hanging out with some other friends. And through a mutual friend, about maybe, I'd say 8 months to 10 months later, I met 2 guys that I work with now through a mutual friend, good mutual friend of ours. And they do landscape construction. So one of my buddies, we were hanging out, and he's like, yeah, they do some little side work here and there. I'll introduce you to them. So I went on a job, and same thing like how you were saying, you know, like something about them was a little different, you know. But you couldn't put your finger on it though. Right, like you're like, they're really cool, you know, really cool guys, and you know, just very patient and understanding. And same thing, I was like, man, you know, like that's a good example of, you know, what I'd like to be, you know. Come to find out later that they were Christians, you know, and we started talking about, you know, relationship and because I used to have a really bad relationship with my mom at the time I did, and you know, one of the guys had a bad relationship with his father when he was growing up, but he had reconciled with his father and kind of discipled me a little bit, you know, and I was able to come to forgive my mom, you know, for all the stuff, you know, leaving, you know, my brother, my sister, and me when we were kids, and then until then, you know, just reconciling all those relationships, I was able to understand like it was about reconciliation.
That's great.
You know, it's about relationship with him, and you know, to see not just about, you know, how somebody affected you, but why what affected them for them to act like that towards you. That it's not always about us, you know. And later and later, just working with them every day, and then one morning, we were going to Starbucks, and they just had it convicted on their heart, man. It was like, man, are you ready to give yourself to Jesus? I was just sitting in the back, and we're in Long Beach. And I'm like, yeah, so I prayed with them and gave everything to Jesus, right in the Starbucks parking lot. And walked in and got some coffees, and still to this day, like that job that we were at and that Starbucks, it's like a little extra special.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was definitely I would have never thought I'd be here after working at a gentleman's club, And I asked him, like, put me where you want me to be, and working on video production here for the church.
Yeah.
I would have never ever thought. But that to me shows me that, like, he's a living God.
Oh, yeah.
Like I never heard his voice. He never talked to me, but through me crying out to him and him slowly putting me where I'm at now, I know he's a living God.
Absolutely. It's interesting to hear some common denominators in our stories about reconciliation with parents and stuff. I had the same thing with my father. I hated the man for 30 years of my life. But God enabled me to get reconciled with him and to lead him to Christ.
Wow.
God healed him of cancer and allowed him to live 6 more years. I actually got to baptize my father as well.
That's cool.
By that time, I'd become a pastor in our church, and God healed him of cancer and enabled him to live 6 more years before he took him home. Yeah. So these are very important things. Forgiveness is huge. I can hear it in your story. It's a big deal. It's great.
Not only that too, but just the thankfulness, just to think about that. What we have to struggle too, like how the story of Christ, how he struggled for us. I think of it in the same way, like when people kind of have that question, like, well, why does he let this or that happen? It's like, well, I mean, he let his son die for us. You don't think he might let us suffer a little bit so somebody could hear our story, and that might not affect somebody else?
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that. I mean, everything in hindsight of being depressed and having my mom did what she did. I'm thankful for the situation, because I wouldn't be here with this mindset and where we're at now.
Well, now you have something to tell somebody who's been who may be in a similar situation to what you've been. You have the answer.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's profound. It's amazing. And it's about also, it's the story of transformed lives as well. We're not once you receive Jesus, you're not the same person that you used to be. Once you allow him to clean you up, and you have his spirit living in you, and he's constantly working on you. He's the best rotor-rooter I know.
Yeah, he is. He is.
And so it's an ongoing transformation. In a nutshell, I guess. I mean, we can say, like, from a theological sense, well, he's my Savior, he's my Lord, King of Kings and all that. In a real personal sense, I've often described him as my personal ICU. He never stops caring for me, even when I don't care for myself.